We could just go kind of blitz point for point, like anything that you wanted to talk about, anything that was like big or outstanding to you when it comes to like the lore, theories, or whatever.
One of the reasons why Kaya might be more involved with the Abyss Order than he leads on, when we were off fighting Dvalin. So
Yeah.
instead of like defending the front gates, he was fraternizing, gaining intel, and he's the one who tells us about the prince or princess, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also he knows how to speak Hilichurl.
Oh yeah, of course we know that. Yeah.
Yeah, he knows more than he's letting on, but he doesn't necessarily want that to be his path because he's happy just going to Angel Share every night drinking.
Yeah, I think I think you're 100% right. A type of character who would be like, I'm keeping this information from the people who are closest to me for their betterment in a certain way. It's very much like Diluc in that way, actually. Like where Diluc is like had this whole persona as Dark Knight fighter, and he goes on protecting people, kind of like in his own way, like on his own type of situation. I honestly think Kai is very similar, but in a more sneaky way.
I agree, especially since Kaya actually has a line where you can hear his thoughts thinking about Diluc, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're both like anti-heroes, and we have bad attitudes. We're so similar in so many ways,
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that rings very true."
Yeah, and Vinny brings up a good point too. He says Kaya's father did call him their only hope, but hope to what? I mean, that's a good question. What is he a hope for? One thing that I've noticed for sure is that he has the Conria eyes, the like diamonds, but they're not. They don't look quite like Dane's or Clothar's.
No, they don't, and I think they actually zoom in a lot into the faces to really show the star eyes, but to also show the difference. I don't think Kaya knows what the last hope thing means. I think that's one thing that he doesn't know. Say he speculates that like, oh, maybe my father really just wanted me to have a better life.
And then yeah, now he's in this type of situation where it's just like found family versus like original family maybe type of situation.
And I also think that fits with a lot of the themes in Mondstadt because I feel like there are so many other characters who have, a found family.
Oh yeah,
Rosaria,
Rosaria.
like Rosaria, Bennett with all his dads. Razor with the wolves and Varka, and
Good point. Yeah, for sure. Oh, okay, well, actually, one thing I will mention, and I do want to ask you this question, is one of the theories that I've seen popping out online is Kaya Caribert?
The thing that I fall back on is that we heard Kaya's father during the Vinelissa Fest, so the Ballads and Brews. His father then sounds like very deep, very serious, very like rational. Well, Clothar is like
he's
very unhinged, unhinged nobleman type thing. Genshin pays enough attention to detail that they would not make them that different, I think.
Then he says, I like the idea that Kaya might be the only non-cursed Conrian, and that's why he is the hope. I could see that.
I agree. I love that too.
Yeah, and Vinny's pointing out something that I actually had a revelation about myself, and this is like one of those dark revelations where you're just like, oh. So, and it's more headcanon-y, and to be fair. So I have a little kind of headcanon that so they explain the difference between the quote-unquote two curses. So the one for foreigners, pretty much people who immigrated to Conria from the other 7 nations, they got cursed to be Hilichurls. Now, to me, that's kind of implying that, oh, maybe that's why there's Hilichurls everywhere compared to some of the other enemies, is because what if those Hilichurls that are everywhere were originally from those 7 nations, and it's just like Conria's gone and they kind of have this instinct to kind of go back home?
Yes, I love this because this actually goes back. Like I said, I had some confusion about the having 2 different curses seems arbitrary. There's something about the pure-blooded Conrians with the Primogem eyes that protects them from turning into Hilichurls. I don't have any explanation. So on Dragonspine, there is a Lawachurl there named Ukko, or Ukko, who is actually the scribe from Salvigdagnir.
Oh, really?
Scribe's box and a princess box, and they have some Salvigdagnir lore, which says that Ukko was like the scribe for Salvigdagnir, so...
I love the way they use the whole idea of the curse, that it's just like, it's not 2 different curses. It's the same curse. It happens to be applied in different ways. Like, this curse has the effects of making you immortal and you turn into a monster. But if you're Conrian, you're resisting that aspect of it. Like, you keep the immortality part, but it's just like you resisting the transformation to your body.
Is super intriguing. Dane and now Clotar, they tout Conria as a godless nation, but at the same time, there seems to be something almost inhuman about them.
The people who say, like, you know, gods ain't anything, they ain't hot crap. As soon as Clotar sees the sinner, right, he's frame one bows down. Like, isn't it, like, it's ironic, isn't it? But I mean, of course, Clotar is a little bit off his rocker, but you know, it's still very, very interesting.
Well, he is off his rocker, but you have to remember that, like, one of the defining points of his character and personality, the gods hate him.
Yeah, he has never. Yeah, that is not shaken. Even though he's crazy, that is not shaken at all.
Yeah.
Clotar goes to the statue of the Seven. It's ironic the things that he's saying to the statue, because he is praying to the Ruta de Vaca / Nahida statue, and it's funny that he's so angry at it. Of just like, you know, you caused this, you did all this, when we as the player knows. Actually, Ruta de Vaca wasn't even there during the Cataclysm. She was chilling with Irminsul, checking if it's okay.
No, that's all very true. But this is implied to be after the Cataclysm ended. So then Nahida would have been locked up by the sages. So it's like, oh, sorry, Clotar, you're not getting your blessing because the sages of the Academia locked up the god.
Yeah,
Oops.
you contacted the one god who cannot be contacted. One actually really dark realization that I kind of came to, whenever it comes to talking about Caribert's mom, the woman from Mondstadt that Clotar fell in love with, he's always very offstandish about talking about her and things like that. The bodies were buried in the farmland, and Clotar actually talks about one of the components of the medicine was this very rare mushroom. It looks like a purple, not purple, reddish, like Ruta de Vaca mushroom. I think he was using her body as fertilizer or something, or some component.
Yep, I that's what I got from it too. You know, that's pretty dark.
It's 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 something.
I love how dark this quest gets with so many aspects.
And I completely forgot it. Oh, the entrance to the crazy domain is actually the entrance into Sumeru that we get to from the chasm. It's something I also noticed. It's where you enter to start your first quest in Sumeru of getting there, and you see the researcher run by.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where the exit entrance is. Yeah, because I made a point to be like, well, wait a minute, where was that? Like, I remember after the quest was over, I was like, where was that going? Oh, it was over there. I see. Because again, we were talking about with that domain, like, its ties to the chasm. Like, if you kept going that way when you get into that map in the present, chasm's right there. Like, maybe. Thing that I want to mention real quick, because I definitely cannot forget to talk about this, is when it comes to the sinner. So do you have any knowledge about Honkai Impact? Yeah, so somebody in my chat, MXZen6, he actually plays Honkai, and I actually showed him this quest earlier and talked about about this to him. As soon as he saw the crystal, he was like, yo, is that Welt? Which is like the first Hersher, or the first Honkai. No, it was the first Honkai, excuse me. Yeah. When he saw this crystal, it reminded him of the first Honkai, or something like that. Is this stretching? Okay. Wiki entry for Honkai is, in the terms of Honkai Impact, is a Honkai is largely viewed as a malevolent first, corrupting humans into creatures, and monsters and such into select Hershers. Which made me think, humans into monsters, huh? Right? Either we want to go with connections of like Hilichurls, or do we want to go like, you know, connections to like maybe the Armor Knights kind of in the chasm, things like that too, like the power to turn humans into monsters. And as well, I believe, I'm not sure if it's Honkai or Hersher, but they always appear when a society gets too advanced to kind of essentially put them in their place, to like essentially set them back. Which may have happened in Conria. Maybe. Possibly.
Yeah, I've definitely heard people make the connection between like, the Abyss and Honkai before, but I don't know enough about Honkai Impact to really say anything about that. One idea I had, the second one who came, so the second throne, of heaven.
You want to give a little summary for that, because I'm not too aware about the second throne.
Oh, so in Before Sun and Moon, it gives so Before Sun and Moon is a book that you find in Enkanomiya. Conria actually tried to steal it from Enkanomiya, and Orobashi actually got executed by Celestia for reading it.
Ooh.
So it tells the story of the Primordial One coming to the world, defeating the 7 sovereigns, splitting into 4 shades, and basically creating humanity and creating the Arc Project or something like that, which again I think has some Honkai connections.
Yeah, I think,
but I'm not.
Arc Project is a Honkai term as well.
Yeah, so it was like this. So it was the second throne of heaven. So the second who came. There was a big war. They basically pierced the firmament, brought delusion, plague, and destruction to the world. And that's when the celestial nails started dropping. And it's implied in some artifact sets that the Primordial One, or Phanes, was dropping the nails to combat this alien invasion. It's also implied that in those sets that the Primordial One won the war. It seems to also imply that this second throne didn't cease to exist. So there may be some underlying, like, oh, second throne is still hanging out somewhere.
He's still around in the shadows, whether it be this crystal or something else.
One of my ideas is that this is like a meteorite, basically a haunted ghost meteorite that speaks to you.
So one of the big things that I haven't really heard anybody talk about this, actually, and makes me happy, because maybe it feels like, oh, am I the first person to kind of recognize this, is I want to talk about names. I feel like names are a big thing in Genshin, but they haven't kind of hit up why they're important, right? So obviously some of the things that we know is, like, there are a lot of demon names for pretty cool characters, like Beelzebub, Baal, Morax, Barbados, even Paimon. Those are all demon names in certain mythologies, right? And me, I am a Persona player, SMT player, so I kind of know these kind of names because they've been brought up in those series. Is Clotho. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Clotho. Is it Greek mythology? You have Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. Those are the 3 sisters of fate. The 3 sisters of fate, and follow me here, those are the ones that loom, I believe it is the something of fate. This is the web of this thread of human fate. There you go. Clotho spun the thread of fate, Lachesis dispensed it, and Apothros cut the thread. So, thread of fate, loom of fate, I think there is a connection here. I think Clotho, the one starting it, and he says about Caribert, is like he's going to do something bigger, right? You know, he's going to become part of the Loom of Fate. And my theory is, this is my theory, I think the Loom of Fate is what the Sinner kind of uses to, because the Sinner has a lot of words, but one of the specific things they say when they're kind of pleading to Clothor is like, become a transcendent one, and I shall shed a tear for you at the end of time. I think the Loom of Fate is actually a way that the Sinner can see all of time. Like, they are using, let's say, the life force or the time of people, and actually they're using their life to be like, okay, start of time, end of time, and they can just kind of observe it in, like, you know, a Loom of Fate. You can see people's fate, essentially.
I like this, and here's why. So I remember, even with the trailer reveal, I was like looking up Caribert, and I was like trying to like figure out any connection with existing lore. Hoyo likes to mix and match and like try and reference things sort of obliquely, because they don't want to do a one-to-one. They kind of want to.
They take a lot of inspirations,
Yeah, but I think actually going back to the 3 fates is really interesting.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. I do like it.
It's specifically called the Loom of Fate, right? A loom is something that you weave, and then obviously fate means like, you know, what is the future of this person, and you know, maybe this is his method of tracking it. One more small thing I want to mention before we get into the crazy stuff, just in case people are coming back from the break. The Lector, for the first time, I think it definitely is implied that the fortune lector that we meet here actually inspired the future heralds that we meet in the Abyss Order.
I mean, I'd buy it. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
The enemy that is this actually does have a name. Abyss Herald Frostfall. Yeah, this is a fortune lector, secret keeper of Fate's End, which is an interesting title, Keeper of Fate's End. So would Fate's End be the sinner or the place that they enter?
Maybe it could also apply to the sinner, because I mean, the sinner explicitly talks about like, hey, can you transcend fate? I bet you could. I believe in you.
Yeah. One thing someone mentioned in chat, does Loom imply there's a thread of fate for each person? I mean, you know what it is? Here's the thing with Genshin. Fate and astrology and all those type of like things, they're very tangible things. We can see that with Mona especially, is that when Mona scries, she is correct. I do not think she has been incorrect at all. Correct me if I'm...
It's heavily implied in the last Golden Apple Archipelago that she is very accurate in her predictions.
So pretty much fate is a very tangible thing, and I think because that is true in the world, I do think there is a thread of fate for each person. Another thing I want to ponder your head about a little bit is again the idea of when does the flashback end? I want to go into that for a little bit more. The implication right now is maybe the flashback ends right after Clothar says, "Oh, Princess of Conria," but I actually want to even say that maybe it diverges before that point. Is that right after Caribert takes off his mask as a Hilichurl and we black out and we pop back in the bed, Clothar has a realization of who we are. Why does he have that realization? What is the catalyst for that realization?
Right, how did he just realize that?
For us, what we experience is that we pass out. Did the Abyss Twin do something, right? That made him kind of realize that? Did something happen when that energy sputtered out? Did maybe we still pass out, but maybe something happened to us when that happened and he like noticed something. Something happened that made him have the realization that we were, Princess of Conria.
I did mention before that it's interesting that you're living the memories of your sibling, right?
Yeah.
And you seem to be doing everything the same.
Yeah.
What if that blackout is a skip because the decisions diverged?
Okay.
Well, yeah. So what if the sibling actually did something different from what you had done? Yeah. I don't know. Guys, that is actually a crack theory. I don't know, but
the closest thing we get is if you when the traveler has a realization, they start freaking out and it starts flashing back to what really happened, right? The last scene that we see is the Abyss Twin reacting to the energy coming out. That was the last like little quote unquote cutaway that happened. So do they pass out? I don't know, or maybe something else happens.
Why would the traveler or the sibling just pass out? Oh man. Oh no, my brain's
it's a low key thing, but it's definitely something. It's definitely something. The Hersher at the end, which was the final Hersher in the previous era of the Honkai timeline. During the war of the previous era, that Hersher did end up wiping most of humanity in Honkai on Earth during that time. Details missing, but let me cut. But after that, when humanity started to recover and advanced, she was nowhere to be found, which is why I brought up the way the crystal addresses itself. For some reason gives me immediate Hersher of the End vibes, and in fact that it's a giant crystal. So I think MX is surmising that this Hersher of the End wiped out a society in Honkai, and then when it was finished wiping that out, it maybe moved to Genshin or to Vat. And then when humanity recovered and advanced, she was nowhere to be found. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me actually of the conversation Nahida was having with the Thoeries, where she's just like, Heavenly Principles has been quiet for a while. Maybe if I destroy this, like they'll wake up, you know? I wonder, was Hersher of the End finished? Did they feel like they were finished when they wiped out Conria or whatever they did? That they're gone now? Or maybe they felt like they were finished when they wiped out the Visheps and then they're gone now and they're actually not there anymore? And apparently, like, part 1 is just ending now. I've heard, like, oof, it's great. It's a bunch of stuff.
Part 1?
Apparently, yeah, right, MX. Isn't like part 1 ending soon? Like, Oh, one kind of big thing I wanted to hit was talk about Fatui and stuff for a little bit. I remember when so Nahida talks to us, and she tells us about the dissenters, right? Really, the Fatui know about these people that enter Tevat through like other worlds? Like, how are they supposed to know that? Like, at first I was just like, are they really able? Like, I knew like the Thoeries and stuff like that when they were powerful. I was just like, oh, how would they really know that? But then like after hearing the things about like the sinner and whatever, I'm just like, maybe I wonder if the sinner actually does have connections to the Fatui. More so than I assumed, because right, we have a character like
Piero,
yeah, Piero,
my husband. He's my husband.
Who assumedly is another Conrian, right? Assumedly is another Conrian.
Yes, he is Conrian.
And it's just like, well, hold on now. It seems like the sinner has a vast knowledge of, or vast powers to be like, it doesn't matter if you're going through memories, it doesn't matter if you're going through time, it's not an obstacle. You know, that's how Dane describes the sinner, as this like kind of all-powerful, kind of omnipotent kind of being that can like understand that. So I was just like, wait a minute. So I could definitely see how a character like the sinner would be able to track who enters and exits Tevat.
I think the sinner would actually, out of anyone, have a very detailed record of every dissenter.
Brought up is I still like the theory that Celestia might actually be dead. That no one is there now. I have zero backing for this though. You know what? That reminds me of? Have you ever played and or heard about Nier Automata?
Didn't the developers say that they find inspiration in Nier?
I don't know if it's Mandela effect too, but I feel like maybe I've heard that too.
For saying that, like, oh, Evangelion is like definitely like a heavy influence on.
Look at freaking Scaramouche's robot. Like in a few seconds, like yeah, that's a freaking Eva. A big turning point in Nier Automata's story is that the two creators of the beings who are on there, the androids and the robots, they don't exist. Humanity does not exist, and the aliens, the alien robot creators do not exist either. The thing Vinny talked about kind of made me think about that is like, what if the primordial one either has left or there is no more, like they've died or whatever, they're gone, and like Sustainer is being there as like big buff bodyguard, being like, nobody can find this out. If you come in here, I'm gonna kick you back down or trap you or whatever. Nobody's gonna find out that no one's here in Celestia.
Paradise Lost, the artifact set, one of our main sources of knowing what may have happened during the War of the Second Throne. The primordial one won, or like Fane's won. But the more I think about it, I'm like, the number one source, like she could have been lied to by someone like, you know, I don't know, the Sustainer of Heavenly Principle, saying like, hey, no, everything's fine, guys, get out.
which is what I forget what the head of Yorha in Nier Automata also does. They also try to hide it too, the fact that there's no humans. It actually makes me think about visions. So one big thing about visions is, and they don't mention it ever in the main game, it's kind of like more side material, is during the Vision Hunt decree, there were no Electrovisions being handed out. People assumed this was Raiden's doing, the Raiden Shogun's doing. When you actually talk to Raiden about that in the menu or whatever, Raiden says, oh, I actually didn't know about that. And then she speaks like she has no control over who gets visions. It has to do with your, what is it, ambition? Yeah, ambition, and there's another aspect to it. Which always made me think, personally, I wonder if Celestia did that intentionally, like made it so no Electrovisions were put out during the time of the decree, to kind of make it seem that Archons are the one giving out visions, when the reality is something completely different.
Ooh, yeah, and that's a good point, and also one of those things that people might miss unless you actually go into the character stories. Because that's like such a huge...
It's big, yeah, it's part. Pretty big.
That is like one of the main like plot points of the entire Archon quest. But then hearing that, it's like, oh, you actually have to read A's like voice lines, right? And she just kind of casually says like, oh,
most players also assume that Archons gave out each of the elemental visions, right?
Oh yeah. I think plenty of other characters and NPCs have alluded to that or said that explicitly. I couldn't name them, but
Yeah. So it's a big assumption when in reality it's like, no, actually it has to do with your ambition and something else, whatever that something else is. The Traveler actually does some things that I wasn't ready for. Clotar asks the Traveler, do you believe in gods? The Traveler's response, I did not expect that at all. Their response was pretty much just like, I don't believe in gods, but I do consider them my friends, / I have had encounters with them, essentially. That would be like all the Archons we've met and befriended versus the Tsaritsa. What that meant for Lumine, or Abyss sibling, I mean. I don't know. I wonder if that line worked differently in the Chinese. That's a big factor too, is that unfortunately sometimes Genshin does have these kind of moments where things said in the American text isn't precisely what they wrote. The Tartaglia lines back in the day, but that was a big thing that happened.
Yeah, how in the EN translation, he seemed more condescending and aggressive, whereas in the original Chinese, he was the opposite of that.
Yeah, he was more so remorseful, but his hands were tied, essentially. I feel like usually people are on the ball, at least for that, in terms of the player base. Thankfully, I haven't really heard anybody talk about this quest being like, oh, this is what they actually meant type of situation.
But I do remember someone pointing out that in the trailer, when the sinner says, oh dear creature, apparently in the original Chinese, it's oh life.
Oh, interesting.
Which I don't...
It's an interesting difference that could theoretically mean something different. What if perhaps the Chinese text specifically about the Archons and not the generic god term? Yeah. That's true. There's a difference between Archons and gods, because gods are more like a class of being, and Archons are the specific 7.
If I don't see something on it, I assume that the translation is good, because usually people make the Twitter threads when the translation is bad.
Yeah. So one of the other things I want to like dig deeper into that we touched on, Lumine and Dainsleiv's relationship. One of the things that I think was intentionally done by the writers is they wanted to point out how much Paimon and the Traveler genuinely like each other. They're like, they tease each other kind of like siblings, but they genuinely care for each other. Even if your dialogue is kind of like being a jerk to Paimon, she still wants to protect you during the night, obviously, right? The couple scenes that Dine has with the flashback Abyss siblings, he seems more direct. My kind of little assumption is that maybe the relationship between Dine and our sibling wasn't the best, as to the degree of like us and Paimon, is what I'm trying to say here.
I can definitely see that. I mean, Dane is a bit more serious in his nature.
It could just be a personality type.
It could just be a personality thing. Where he's like, oh, you've been crying. Oh, you were dreaming of your sibling. Gotta go.
Yeah.
So like, and again, that could just be like a Dane thing where it's like, feelings, emotion. I gotta bounce.
maybe. Knowing what we know about Paimon, and also just to preface this, I absolutely hate the whole Paimon's gonna betray us thing. I think that'll be the dumbest, stupidest thing ever, and they should never do that. But if we're thinking about Paimon in the same situation, if something like this happened to us, we would almost definitely tell Paimon that it happened. I believe.
Oh wait, actually, one thing that I'm sort of realizing right now with this line of dialogue, perhaps there's missing dialogue here, because he's like ... All right, so it could be implied then that you're reliving the memory, but you're somehow missing some dialogue of like what your sibling said.
Yeah.
So maybe there is more to that, and we just don't know.
That's true. Yeah. Lemons asks in chat to you, actually. Ruse, what are your opinions about the false primordial one and Asmonde's Shades theory?
Do you mean like a false primordial one, like the Second Throne like took over the primordial one and did like a sneaky little haha, no one notices that I've taken over I think it's a possibility. And what do you mean by Asmodee's shades theory? I don't know if I'm actually familiar with that. Oh, how the Archons might be shades of Asmodee.
Who's Asmodee? I'm unfamiliar with that name.
I think it was like technically data mined like in 1.0 to be like the name for the unknown god.
Interesting. Okay.
I actually haven't heard the theory that they might be shades of Asmodee, because even thinking about the Archons we do know, they seem so different. Venti he's like a wisp of the thousand winds.
Yeah, wind spirit.
So he has connections to Easteroth. God knows what the heck is going on with Zhongli, because he's like 6,000 years old.
Yeah, he's an adept.
Probably dragon. Like people have theorized like, oh, is he Descender? Like I personally don't believe it, but it's interesting to look at.
It
like,
is.
Yeah, and then of course like and Makoto.
For all intents and purposes, they seem like humans, low key, or gods, whatever you want to call it. There's nothing. They've always been who they are. Like, they're the first of the original Archons who've never really changed appearance, which is interesting.
Interesting point. Like, out of all of them, they seem to have like the most human, but they just happen to be like super strong and OP.
Yeah.
Because, and then when you look at Nahida or even Ruka Devata, like they're avatars of Irminsul. Like Nahida was like literally a branch from Irminsul. So they all seem to have these very different but powerful sort of origins. Another theory I've heard about Zhongli is that he was one of the original 7 sovereigns.
I feel like that one has a better connection because well, not really though. The Vishaps do have more connections to Adeptal beasts than like anything else.
Wait, I agree in the sense that I buy this more than I buy Zhongli being a Descender.
Yeah.
Because he also has a dragon form, so like, I mean, dragons, bishops.
If Zhongli was said to be a bishop as well, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think he shares enough themes that we know with the bishops to be one. Obviously, the eyes being the biggest thing. I know Zhongli has changed appearance and things like that. It seems like he's just an Adepti.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that like I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that like all the Archons just seem to have very different origins.
Yeah.
So it's hard to make like one singular like thread between all of them.
Lemon says, you know how you can manipulate Irminsul and how Arutavaka was erased? What if Irminsul was built around not only recording time, but also manipulating Archon's memories and origins, since we know they can do that? My only problem with that, personally, is more so a writing thing. I think at this point the Genshin writers are very good. I don't think they would try to pull those backstories we told you for these characters? They're all wrong. Like, I don't think they would pull that.
I agree. And I've had... Wait, can I share a crack theory?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of my crack theories, so like Zhongli's second story quest, really delves into the erosion that Aishtaha particularly faces, but also Zhongli. Like Zhongli has said, like erosion, like it's a big deal.
I love that concept, the erosion as a concept. I love it so much.
What if erosion is like you've lived so long, your memories are eroding because there have been so many Irminsul rewrites about the world that your memory is kind of scrambled. You don't really remember how things truly were, you know?
Okay. But I think maybe breadths of that could be true from the things that when Ruta Devaha is removed from Irminsul, everybody forgets except for theoretically all the dissenters because they were never part of the world in the first place. Vinny says, I love how aware Zhongli is. He knows the Traveler is here as a witness. Xiao mentioned that as much. Traveler will be there to share the memories in the end. Actually, that's a good point. You know, if we want to go with this, and say like the residents of Teyvat are subjected to their world, right? They're subjected to Irminsul's memory changes and everything, as the Traveler isn't. Maybe that's what Zhongli meant. My memories could be changed. My whatever could be changed. You will never change because you're not part of this world, so you can tell the true history. Because we know the true history is that Rutavaka gave up her life. That's not the history that Teyvat knows, but we know that's the true history. Maybe that's what he was implying.
I like this, and I think this actually gets at some theorists were thinking like, oh, Zhongli is a descender, but he's basically said like, oh, I can't record things like I would want to. You can. So it seems like Zhongli can't be a descender because he can't remember things as they were. Maybe he's lived long enough he can recognize that like, oh, some things don't make sense, or like maybe he is relying on us. He's like, oh, you're better than stone tablets. You can actually witness, right?
Yeah, you can actually witness these changes, and yeah, you're not going to be affected by them. Spade says, Ruse, I've always been confused on what archons are. Are they people who ascended to godhood, or do they start out as gods? We kind of talked about that a little bit. At least for two of them, it seems like ascension to godhood. At least with Venti for sure, because Venti says he starts off as a spirit.
Yeah, but he doesn't start off as a human, so it's like there is a level of ascension, but not necessarily starting from like a human form. Like it could be like a lower elemental being, just kind of winning the war, you know?
Yeah. Like there are more gods in this world than there are archons. I think God is just a more, like I said earlier, more of a class of being, right?
Yeah.
Is it Osiel a god too? Am I crazy?
Yeah, Osiel is a god.
Yeah.
Orobashi was like the best god. Like he was like, oh hey, I'll take care of you guys. Oh, I guess I gotta sacrifice myself too. Okay. Yeah, but there is evidence of like plenty of other gods. Oh, and that's the whole premise behind like Tatarigami, right? Or like maybe even like the karmic energy that Zhao is oh, and even the consecrated beasts. In their enemy descriptions, it said that they're so powerful because they're feasting upon the remains of dead gods.
Don't if you kill a god, whatever their power was explodes outward, like what happened to Guizhong and the Dust People. Oh no, they meant the Salt God, not Guizhong. Because I was like, I think Guizhong's something. I think they meant the Salt God.
Havria.
Havria, the god of salt.
Yeah, Havria. So yeah, Havria definitely had like a burst that turned people into salt, which I don't know if that's a common feature because we don't know of any other occurrences, but we do know of a lot of other god deaths. But I also think Havria is like a very oblique reference to like Sodom and Gomorrah where like people turn to salt.
Yeah, because they defied. She went against the contract. I think that was the biggest thing.
Oh, my understanding. Well, hold on. Actually, I don't remember the quest.
Me neither. I at all. Not that much. Not that much.
No, my impression was that maybe more similar to Orobashi. Like she just kind of like tried to flee and like just I guess at some point her power failed, so she just I don't know, turned people into a lot of salt.
Maybe it's like when
salt
a god
and betrayal.
Oh yeah, that quest is crazy. Maybe it's when a god loses control of their power before death. Possibly. I wonder if that has ties to erosion as well. I don't know. Okay, you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of Orobashi, right? Because wasn't Orobashi cool before their death?
She was like the coolest.
Okay.
Up until his death. After his death, he was not cool because of the Tatarigami.
Yeah. Okay.
But that also wasn't his fault. It's like, oh no, it's just like his skeleton and remains like emitting cursed Deuce energy.
Yeah.
So
I love the concept of erosion because maybe if it means something more, that'll also be cool. But I just love the idea that I've never seen it in any other like anime, video game, or anything of just like, yeah, if you live this long, you're probably gonna go a little cray, or you're just like not gonna be the same person you were like. After 200 years, you're definitely not going to be the same person that you were 100 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, the fact that so many of these characters in, like, other medias, like, stay the same after thousands, hundreds of years. And, like, with Genshin, it's just like...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with Genshin, like, yeah, you're probably going to erode after a good chunk of time. You're probably not going to be the same person you were before.
After living so long, like, your perception changes. Like, in this case, into madness. I mean, I think... Wait, this is a side note. I'm so sorry.
No,
but like the only other example I can think of this is like, have you ever read the Watchmen comics?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. So, well, there's a character, Dr. Manhattan. He gains immortality, but his perspective changes just because he's living so long, and everything seems so. Going back to this, like one thing, like with Clotar. like him losing his loved one,
Yeah.
however that happened, but like also like dealing with like his eternally cursed child. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
damn.
Oh yeah, and
that
like
would make
that's gonna do something to you.
I would go crazy after literally 2 days.
The fact that he can
Honestly.
still farm is pretty impressive. Brett says, I'm sorry if I missed some of you guys' chats. So yeah, sometimes that happens. I wonder if the Hexen Circle has much more to do with major events than what Alice has said. I'm wondering if the voice inside our heads was the witch that Alice said can talk to people in our heads when she wants to lead someone down the right path. If so, that would mean some of the Hexen Circle has access to Irminsul, and I'm talking about the mysterious voice that was in our head when we ventured into Irminsul with Scaramouche. I think that it's confirmed, because there is a sideline with the Traveler if you finish Scaramouche's quest.
But that is N or Nicole, so the one who can randomly interject. They do establish Hexen Circle as an association of witches who specifically investigate Irminsul. So they are very aware of Irminsul. Rhine-Daughter is there. Oh, and it's like, oh, she's just like casually presented as like one of the witches. But people seem to forget that Rhine-Daughter was the greatest sinner. She literally created Durin and all these Rift Hounds and the Rift Wolves. Rhine-Daughter contributed, if not caused, the cataclysm. But we still don't have exact details on that. I mean, my working hypothesis is that it was a bit of an oopsie. Created or summoned a lot of these abyssal monsters, perhaps accidentally. We get a line about her being like, "Oh, she's Albedo's mom."
It's probably the reason Albedo might go insane later.
Especially since in the second Dragon Spine event we got the Albedo clone, like the original Albedo, who was supposed to be fed to Durin.
I think that it's been so long that even I'm not remembering.
Yeah. So Rhine-Daughter is interesting.
If you lose memories with erosion, would then with time Xiao loses original karmic debt? Even I don't completely understand karma. I don't know if you guys know karma a bit better than me. I've never really understood it too much.
Sometimes it's hard to make analogies just because every region uses very different names for everything. I think I originally thought it was like, oh, this is more like a fighting monsters with abyssal corruption, but in fighting them, being corrupted yourself. And I think that's what happened to Bosacius.
Bosacius, yeah. The only thing I can think of is that you could definitely say, in the early parts of him being in the deepest parts of the chasm, it did feel like he did erode, because he didn't know who he was for a good significant portion of that.
Oh yeah. Oh god. I think of that cutscene. I just want to. Oh, I'm sobbing.
He was a good man. That cutscene hits. You definitely do feel bad for.
That was a good cutscene. Like the musical cues, like the art, so spot on.
I was gonna say, gonna just highlight a message here. Could Caribert possibly be Kaya Alberic? And if so, does he have a much bigger part to play? I think we talked about that very early. You may have missed it.
There are a lot of good, compelling points, but the thing that like kind of draws me back from that is the fact that Vinelissa Fest, that was only like 4 patches ago.
3 maybe.
Oh, not even. But you actually hear Kaya's father speak during that event, and he sounds very like resolved. It's a very deep, resolved, strong, like he has intention. And if you compare the voice to Clothar is like very unhinged. So the voices are completely different. Like even if they were like sort of like trying to speak the same way, I don't think they would match. If they wanted them to be the same, actually had the same voice actors. Yeah, especially within like 4 patches.
But one of the small theories I had after this quest kind of came out, one of the first things I thought about, the way Clothar talks about his son, he says, "This is my illegitimate child," right? Which got me into thinking, what if he had a legitimate child, right, with the person he was originally betrothed to? We would be a pure-blooded Conrian, right? And and again, I'm not 100% on the timeline just because I don't know about the timeline. So what if, let's say for example, so Clothar has a child with pure-blooded Conrian woman, and he has a child with the Mondstadt woman who becomes Caribert. What if that, whoever that was, were banished from Conria because, Clothar went with a Mondstadt woman and he was royalty and he wasn't supposed to do that. What if that whoever mom and son, that line ended up being Kaya's line?
I think that makes more sense, that like, because he specifies, oh, this is my illegitimate child as opposed to my fully legitimate children. He lived during the cataclysm. Like, he speaks about the red skies and like the end of like Conria. So one thing that we do have to grapple with is like, how old is Kaya? Like, Kaya doesn't seem to be cursed with immortality or anything. So
he was younger in the time of the comics and things like that, right? Like, he actually had a younger body.
Yeah, so actually, like in the flashbacks with Diluc, he looks he aged normally.
Yeah, and the way as well, the way Clothar talks about Caribert is that he's going on to live a better life, becoming the Loom of Fate. It would be weird, at least for me, if that means he just becomes a normal dude walking around. Like, the way it sounded like it sounds like, oh, Caribert's dead, but his being, his body or whatever is going towards a better purpose.
And that's the impression I got. Like there's no indication of what actually happened to Caribert, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like something happened to him, and he probably isn't just a normal human right now. Like, if he's the Loom of Fate, like, there's something else going on. Like, I don't know what it is, but he's something else. Whereas Kaya, less restricted in how he can live.
One thing I want to mention real quick before I forget about it is, again, this is more of like the theory aspect. What do you think is behind the mask? Do you have any theories? What do you think behind a Hilichurl's mask? A, Clothar knows and tells Caribert not to do it, and B, it's assumed that Caribert does it, and that's what makes him like leave the house.